Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. If I could just remind you, Kieran, that the purpose of the show, as I just said, is to look at the money behind the beautiful game and in no way mention the beautiful game, which at the moment isn't in any way, shape or form. We got that, Kieran? Just the money. I know it's the important part for you, but we're just looking at the money behind the beautiful game. How are you?
Well, I'm pretty grumpy. I put 20 quid on us to lose yesterday, and Danny Ings scored a winning goal. So, as usual, my side let me down.
Well, it serves you right. Danny Ings plays for... You won, didn't you?
I think we may have done, yes.
Yeah. How did Danny Ings score? Was it an own goal?
No. It was Danny Ings to score the winning goal for West Ham.
Oh, well, Kieran, you know what I'm going to say. It serves you right then, in that case.
Yes.
And also, you'd rather take the 20 quid hit and win.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll take that, yeah.
So you put a bit on Brighton to lose and Danny Ings to score. It gets more specific every time we mention your despicable theory. All right, our first question, Kieran, and I'm looking forward to our second question, Kieran, because trumpets sounded when that question came in. Not for me, for you. That Tom McCormick has our first question. And it's a question that is becoming increasingly relevant, especially, those of you who watched the Man City Newcastle game on Saturday will understand what I'm talking about. Tom McCormick says, I'm always surprised that in matches where most advertising is aimed at the multinational TV audience, the hoardings haven't just become green screens. This would allow different advertising rights in different markets, solving issues such as certain products not being allowed to be advertised in a particular country, companies only operating in certain countries, etc. Am I smart, or would it be likely just be more complicated for little or no extra revenue? I think we should probably explain, Kieran, to some people who maybe operate in the world of numbers and don't understand the ethereal nature of this sort of thing, that a green screen is basically just, as it says, it's a plain green screen onto which you can put any picture you like, essentially. So you can, say as you go into the Amazon, because you can just put a picture of the Amazon on the green screen and it looks like you're in the Amazon. And of course, Kieran, that's right, theatre green rooms are called green rooms.
Oh. Because
it was the last room in the theatre in which you could wear the colour green, because in the limelight, in the early theatres, the limelight was actually, it was sort of lime-type gas that provided the limelight, which was green. So if you wore green on stage, you disappeared. There you are.
Wow.
This is the one BAFTA won't be listening to. I can guarantee it. So is Tom smart?
I've been to the Amazon.
What?
I went to the Amazon in 1991. I went to the Peruvian Manu National Reserve in search of the giant river otter, of which there's only about 100 mating pairs left. And it was one of those really surreal moments. We were out there. We were on a raft. We didn't want to make any noise. We just had a raft and a pole to sort of push us through. And we saw a mother with 4 or 5 baby, and it was worth it being eaten alive by mosquitoes for 3 weeks just for that sort of really incredible moment. And we were camping on the banks of one of the tributaries to the Amazon, and I remember sort of waking up about 11 o'clock at night and needing to make a visit. So we had this area where we did our visits. And you go out with a little torch, and all you can see is the eyes of the caiman, their version of crocodiles, all basking. And you'd see dozens of them. They weren't too big; they're only sort of about 3 or 4 feet. But it was very surreal and scary. I mean, you're okay at night because they're cold-blooded animals. They don't tend to move at night, so therefore you'd be safe. But it was really very, very spooky indeed.
Well, also in those days, Kieran, you were quite lanky, a bit stringy as well, I imagine.
Yeah, not a lot of meat on me.
Yeah, it's no wonder, Kieran. It's no wonder these otters aren't mating. It's people like you blundering around the jungle trying to catch with you. I had forgotten. Oddly enough, I had forgotten he'd been to the Amazon in the same way that during a writing meeting once, the subject of the film Das Boot came up. And somebody, one of the producers went, I've never been in a submarine. And then about a minute later, he went, no, hang on, yes, I have. It's like, how can you forget having been in a submarine? Anyway, Tom, have we forgotten the question? A green screen, is Tom being smart, or is this more complicated for little or no extra revenue?
Well, Tom is smart, but the football industry is already there, thanks to, and I quote, virtual replacement perimeter technology, which was introduced in 2017 by both the Premier League and the EFL. But because we've now got, I mean, it doesn't work for everything, but because we now have LED adverts, it is possible to localize them. It does help in terms of revenue, and also from, as Tom rightly points out, that given that certain products are prohibited in certain geographical areas, it does allow for sort of targeted adverts for individual regimes and individual geographical areas, and it raises extra money. So it has been around. I think it is a further indication that football clubs will use whatever it takes to try to marginally increase their revenues, and expect it to increase. Although I probably the same as you, I just feel very uncomfortable seeing those double size perimeter adverts at the Etihad. I know it's only on one. On one of the stands, which is, of course, the one which face the TV audiences, and they probably get 3 times as much money for twice as much space, because they are very striking. But it's not football, is it?
So, are you saying then, Kieran, that if Liverpool were to be playing Newcastle, if I was watching it live in Dublin, I might be seeing a different advert at exactly the same time to someone who was watching it in Riyadh, for example?
But potentially, if this is my understanding,
right, okay.
Certainly I've seen the photographs of a particular match. Unless somebody's on a gigantic wind-up, I know that the marketing the marketing industry is very innovative. So this is a logical thing to do. And if not, if I got it wrong, then I think Tom's approach, you can see the merits of that as well. Well,
absolutely. In terms of revenue, I always find it quite intriguing. At Tottenham, especially, you see a lot of adverts that you can't decipher. It's fascinating to work out what they're actually advertising. Now, Kieran, here's a question. Every now and again we get a question, Kieran, that I think, this is a good question. I really like this question. I'm going to engage with this question. And every now and again we get a question that literally clouds of angels dressed as accountants get. I was going to say the clipboards. In my world, accountants always have clipboards. But it comes from Kane Baker. And Kane Baker's question is a simple one, Kieran. Kane Baker says, my question is about capital allowances. Are there any available to clubs when they sign a new player? And what tax relief do clubs get around transfers? Now, my only thought on that is I wonder whether capital allowances was the same as London waiting, but then I decided probably wasn't.
Right, yes. Capital allowances is HMRC's version of depreciation. So because they don't trust the accountants when they're trying to say, well, how long should a car last or a computer, that they have their own rules. But when it comes to football transfers, you only get capital allowances on what we refer to as property, plant and machinery. So certain buildings, vehicles, computers, things which you can tap effectively. With football players, we've said that I think a common misnomer is that people believe you are buying the football player when you pay a transfer fee, but actually you are transferring the player's registration certificate with the local football association, which gives that club the unique right to employ that player. The player is unable to play for any other club unless you give permission via the form of you take financial compensation. So as far as HMRC are concerned, the rules that they employ is that they just say, we will follow the accounting. And therefore, they use the same rules as we have for amortization in respect of players. So if you sign a £50 million player on a 5-year contract, for tax purposes, you'd say, well, the accountants are amortizing at 10 million a year, so therefore we will give you a 10 million a year allowance. Now, in terms of Kane's second question, what tax release do clubs get around transfer? This always allows me to introduce the slightly sniggersome concept of what's referred to as rollover relief, which is
You said that
something to do with tax.
You said that with some relish, Kieran. That's why I'm laughing.
I do, yes. And the way that rollover relief works is as follows: is that if you sell a player at a profit, instead of having to pay tax, if you reinvest the money, if you reinvest the sale proceeds into buying new players within the next 3 years, then you can effectively knock it off against your purchase. So let's say that to make it simple, let's say that we've got an academy player who cost us nothing. We sell for £40 million, and you then buy a player for 50 million. What you can do is say, well, we're not going to be taxed on the 40 million pounds worth of profit on the player we've sold because we've reinvested it in the new player. And then if you sell that new player, provided again within 3 years you buy another replacement. So it's kicking it down the road as often as you can before you finally pay tax. There is, however, and I'm indebted to the people who run some of these specialist websites, and I like specialist websites, as you can imagine, Kevin. But I've spent the morning on Tax Journal, market leading insight for tax experts, and they've got a whole area on this particular topic. There's a particular interest when it comes to signing Spanish players, because the transfer rules in Spain are different to those of the rest of Europe and the UK and so on. In Spain, the player buys themselves out of the contract and then can sign for a new club. Right. Now, if you mess up, let's say that Manchester United are signing Frankie de Jong from Barcelona this summer. If Manchester United say, well, Frankie's got a buyout clause, and in all Spanish transfers, that the individual player will have in their contract a buyout clause. Yeah. So let's say that Frankie de Jong's buyout clause is £80 million. What will normally happen is if you're buying from France, if you're buying from Belgium, buying from Italy, the buying club gives the selling club 80 million. In Spain, it's slightly different. The football player has to give his employer 80 million pounds and then gets that 80 million from the buying club. If you give the player the 80 million, then that's deemed to be part of the player's employment contract, potentially. And if, therefore, it's part of the player's earnings, there can be huge tax issues in terms of national insurance, PAY, and so on. So you've really got to be very, very careful when doing Spanish transfers, and you've got to make sure that the money never ends up, even for a microsecond, in the bank account of the player. Otherwise, you've got a huge potential tax issue if HMRC come a knocking.
I'm on a bound to suggest, Kieran, that you might like to change that description, anything you could tap, because I could tap Harry Kane. He wouldn't like it. I could do it. So I just want to get my head around the capital allowance depreciation thing, Kieran. So a friend of mine has a small business manufacturing sports shirts, made cricket shirt. And so he bought a big piece of equipment recently for printing or whatever it was. So it's a big outlay. He pays VAT on that. So how does depreciation affect tax? Are you saying that if he sells that in 3 years' time, he pays less tax on any earnings from it? Is that how it works? Are we saying?
Well, it will be slightly different, because if you think about it, if you're buying a piece of machinery for your business, let's say he pays 100 grand for a piece of machinery, it's going to last him 5 years. Yeah. Under the capital allowance rules, the government will either allow you a fixed amount of money, or they'll allow you a fixed percentage of the cost to set off against the profits from running the business.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And also, you normally say, well, at the end of 4 or 5 years, what you can do with that piece of machinery, you'll get one of Uncle Terry's mates to take it off your hands and take it to a scrapyard and dispose of it, environmentally, of course. Okay, they won't fly tip it because they're honourable guys. But with a footballer, it's different because if you sign a football player on a 5-year contract and that football player turns out to be quite tasty, then you can sell at a profit, whereas you don't tend to do that with machinery. So things like rollover relief really aren't an issue for manufacturers because you tend to be selling scrap and you're getting scrap value for it. With footballers, because you can sell them at a profit, things are slightly reversed.
Right, okay. Our next question comes from Ollie K, and it's an interesting one, actually, and it caused me to look at something in a new light. It didn't change my mind, but I did at least look at it in a new light. And Ollie says, you always bemoan the way that clubs and players launch fan tokens in a way that suggests they are investments and have some sort of intrinsic value. I wonder if there are any players or clubs that have launched fan tokens in the right way and have fully explained the reality clearly to fans at the same time. Also, has Kieran tried the Higgity cheddar and onion chutney veggie rolls? I think he would like them. Now, obviously, 2/3 of the way through that question, I was thinking, that's an interesting one from Ollie. I'm going to have a look here and investigate whether there are any clubs that have done it in the right way, and decided no. And then I thought, why has Ollie not asked me whether I've tried the Higgity cheddar and onion chutney veggie rolls? Because now, if I do try them, I won't like them, just to spite Ollie. It's as simple as that.
Do you think this is a way of trying to get around our sponsorship arrangements?
Oh yeah, because I've mentioned
because Ollie might work for Higgity cheese and onion.
Well, to be fair to him, if he does, well done, Ollie. Congratulations. You're thinking outside the box when it comes to advertising to a target audience who I suspect aren't necessarily waking up in the morning thinking about a Higgity cheddar and onion chutney veggie rolls. But in the same way that people said to me, you've got to watch The Wire, you have to watch The Wire. I hated it from the first 10 minutes in.
No.
Oh, I couldn't stand it. Same with Happy Valley or whatever that terrible thing was called.
Oh, good grief. Omar Little is he's one of my all-time heroes.
I don't remember the names, Kieran. I might be Breaking Bad, I don't know, same thing. Tell me to watch it and I'll decide I don't like it 15 minutes in. Especially Happy Valley. So it's not if somebody turns you down for a loan, your first response is not to have their daughter kidnapped. Anyway, are there clubs, Kieran, that are launching? I mean, certainly when Palace launched Socios, the warnings were certainly there. To be fair, the whole thing started with a 5-page warning about what could go wrong if you use this as a gambling or investment bet. But I'm not entirely sure if you're opposed to the sort of concept in the way that I am. I think it's hard to accept that some clubs will be doing it the right way. But am I wrong?
I don't. I'm not opposed to them in theory. Yeah. It's sort of it's a glorified form of Panini card, and also having just seen that the price of a first-class stamp is going up to £1.10. And as an ex-stamp collector, I'm just mortified. I used to collect whole sheets of stamps back in the day. But I'd have to take out a second mortgage to.
Well, also, do you know what infuriates me about that, Kieran, is that who sends letters? I'll tell you who sends letters. My 85-year-old Auntie Pat sends letters.
Yep.
My 90-year-old Auntie Audrey sends letters. They're the people getting penalised. This assumption that everyone else is emailing, that's fine. It's ludicrous. So those poor women who can't wait for birthdays or Christmas so they can get in touch with people, maybe the only time of year. It's going to be ruinous for them. It's just shameful. Anyway, off you
go. So having a digital Panini card or a digital program or something like which in theory will come with a serial number, and that serial number gets entered into a drawer. It's no different from what we used to do in the physical form. when we were growing up as fans. You'd have your halftime draw, and you remember you used to have that bloke walking around the perimeter of the ground, and everybody would think it hilarious every single match. So, get that bloody thing down! I can't see the football. And that was that was part of the game. And I paid my 10 pence at times to do that, and occasionally win some sort of assigned program. And if the NFTs are going to be marketed as that, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. What I find uncomfortable is, and we've just seen that there's a really good article in The Athletic this weekend by Joey Durso. Joey is not a fan of the industry, shall we say, that surrounds the world of crypto. And he's got exactly the same reservations as me, is that it's the nudge, nudge, wink, wink relationship. So Paul Pogba's NFTs, it's launched with a bang. It's very glamorous. You've got the player saying, these are my products. And people have an element of trust with celebrity. It could be argued that you shouldn't do that, and part of me, the cynical part of me, but I'm reasonably financially sophisticated. The cynic in me says, if you're going to take financial advice from John Terry and Paris Hilton, then frankly, you get all that you deserve. But there are some people that get suckered into. They live in a slightly different environment. Their news and information isn't coming. I still watch the BBC News every night, or other people say, "Well, I've never read a newspaper. I look at YouTube. I look at Instagram." That's how I pick up my understanding of the broader world, and therefore you are going to be presented with these, and they are going to be not explicitly sold as investments, but as soon as the initial picture goes up, that's when the crypto bros pile in, and it's buy the drop. This is a guarantee. And you go, well, who's going to be foolish enough to believe this? Well, for people that don't have a financial education, and I do think that a lack of financial education is one of the shameful things about our much broader education system. It is that they will see it and they say, well, Paul Pogba's a success, Paris Hilton's a success, John Terry's a success, and so on. They wouldn't put their name to these things unless they felt that they were worthwhile, when actually, the chances are it's just another paycheck for the individuals concerned. It's just another endorsement. And they end up losing money. So I don't have any issue with the idea of tokens as a form of engagement, as a way of buying a club lottery ticket, but it should be seen as that. And in exactly the same way as I wouldn't encourage anybody to go and spend their month's salary on scratch cards, because scratch cards aren't an investment, it's a lottery. Don't spend money on these things thinking they're an investment. And the tragedy reading Joey Durso's article is that there's people, and I've got to be careful here because I sound like being patronising, xenophobic, but these people are often in other geographical markets, and it's being sold completely differently there. With very much a hard sell, and they've stuck in a month or two's of salary, and let's face it, they're not on big money to begin with, and they end up losing everything. And of course, the football players don't want anybody to lose money. They're making no accusations with regards to the individuals concerned, but they'd be completely unaware of what's going on.
Interesting that you used to collect stamp. Collecting runs in your family. Uncle Terry collected banknotes, I believe, didn't he? Is that right?
Yes.
What does buy the drop mean, Kieran, for those of you who aren't financially sophisticated, as you say?
Buy the drop. This is if a price of something is tanking,
right?
What do you do? So let's say that for example, Manchester United's share price has dropped from $27 to $20 as it appeared that the Glazers were starting to get cold feet with regards to selling the club. And therefore, some people will say, oh, well, it can't keep going down. So therefore, if you buy now, it will start bouncing back. And that's quite common in the crypto industry. When a product is launched, the share price or the price of the crypto product collapses, and then you get the internet experts who don't actually have any sustainable reason or any concrete reason for saying that there's an inherent value in these products, saying, well, if you buy them now, it will start to return upwards. And if you've seen Trading Places with Eddie Murphy, it's not dissimilar to what Eddie Murphy did in the film. And if you shout loud enough that something is going to go up, then some people will start believing you. And of course, once they start to buy, that's when you sell, because you've just suckered them into buying something which is of no inherent value.
Can I tell you why I've not watched Trading Places, Kieran? It's because so many people said to me, you have to watch Trading Places. My accountant, as you know, Bobby Numbers, listens to this show, and he'll be over the moon that you gave that advice about not buying scratch cards, because he's always saying it. And I'm always saying to him, look, one of these scratch cards could pay my next tax bill. You never know. Do you know what I don't like about socios, Kieran? It's not just the fact that they hide the financial risk. It's the fact that the launch of these things always implies to a fan that you're not a proper fan of the club unless you're buying this beer mug with Will Sahar's autograph on it. You can go to every home and away game, but there's still, and it creates a division because so often the buying of this socios gives you a chance to meet the manager of the club when every fan should have a chance to meet the manager of the club. But we need to move on, Kieran, because we do have other questions. But one final one. Have you tried the cheddar and onion chutney veggie roll?
Not yet, but I need to I need to pop down to Waitrose because I'm making some ceviche tonight, and I've run out of organic limes, so I'll get some when I'm there.
You don't make ceviche, Kieran. You're just squirting acid on fish.
No, you got to have the right.
You got to squirt it from the right height.
Yeah. It's the background flavours that matter. You got to have a little bit of palm sugar, a little bit of coriander, some ground pepper.
Are you trying to get around the Baroness for some reason?
Yes, yeah. I'm working all week in Liverpool, and we're at Elland Road on Saturday. So why don't I just come home? Why don't I just go and stay overnight on Friday night and come home on the Saturday after the match?
Fair point. Mark Stottard says, when the owner of a football club announces that he or she is putting the club up for sale, what does that actually mean? Is it a waiting game that they're simply hoping this announcement alone will see interested parties come forward, or is it a more active strategy usually adopted to market the club? And could a sales agent be appointed to find a buyer?
Well, certainly sales agents are appointed on a regular basis because we presently have the Rain Group, who were effectively appointed by a combination of Roman Abramovich and the UK government to sell Chelsea Football Club. And they are now operating on behalf of at least some of the Glazer family with regards to Manchester United. It's a strange one because in the world of mergers and acquisitions, and that's effectively where we are in the football space, there are people constantly pitching. I mean, I probably get once or twice a month contacted by people either on a buy side or a sell side saying, what do you think this club is worth? If we were to put it up for sale, what do you think we should be trying to get? And I'm just a teacher, so I don't know why they're asking. But people assume I know a lot more than I actually do. And this is for clubs. I go, well, I didn't know. And I said, we're not actively putting it up for sale. We're just testing the water. And if you think about the main asset that many people own, it's their house. Now, if somebody walks up my drive and offers me a ridiculous amount of money for our house, I'll ask the Baroness what to do because as long as I've got Wi-Fi, I don't really care where I live. But if so. It doesn't mean that the house is up for sale, but it's open to offers. And with regards to Palace, there are a constant swirl of stories that such and such a person is willing to sell their shares, and that gives us an overall value of Palace at around about 240, 250 million would appear to be the overall asking price. Does that mean that Palace is actively up for sale? No, but if you want to have a conversation, then that's what you need to be talking about in terms of price to Textor and to Steve Parish and to the others and so on. So that is the position we're in with a huge number of clubs, because it's a bit like owning a racehorse from a financial point of view. The only two interesting days are the day that you buy it and the day that you sell it, and everything in between is pretty much of a loss-making exercise. And some people have reached that point where they're fed up of the abuse, given that they are subsidising the club. They've run out of money. They're under pressure from their family because the owner themselves are getting stressed, or they've just reached the age where they feel that it's appropriate to move on. So there's normally sort of a formal reason for saying that the club is up for sale, but quite often, and I know half a dozen clubs at present who the owners are quietly saying, we're not selling, but we're not selling if anybody's interested.
Our next question, Kieran, comes from Jivan Karakal. Apologies, Jivan, if I pronounced that wrongly. It is a question, Kieran. It's a question that's topical, which is why I'm happy to discuss it. But there's also a bit of background before we get to the actual question. But I think it's right to go through that. As Jivan says, I'm a Manchester United fan and I work in finance. I personally think that football clubs should be run for utilitarian reasons and not profit, and that there should be rules against football clubs being listed because that inherently prevents on-field success from being the priority. That being said, one thing that I hear a lot is people are angry at the Glazers because they added a load of debt to United's balance sheet. In reality, though, that's how most deals work in any industry, i.e. a leveraged buyout. And realistically, any takeover that removes the Glazers, given the value of United, would also probably require a large amount of debt finance. Also, whilst the club will have to service the debt in the meantime, the outstanding balance will affect the Glazers' equity value upon exit anyway. Please, could you discuss this on the podcast for clarity and give your thoughts on whether you agree or do you think that somebody could actually pay for United in cash? It's also topical because one of our WhatsApp Palace groups is one normally quite intelligent chap who insists that Palace should get into as much debt as it takes to buy better players, which is not something we all agree with. But I'd be interested to see what you have to say about the United case, Kieran.
Right. In the case of the Glazer family, a leverage buyout is likely to prove to be one of the most spectacularly successful corporate acquisitions in the sporting world of all time. Wow. Because they paid £770 million for the club, 770 to 790, of which they probably put in about 60 or 70 themselves. And they're going to walk away, if there is a wholesale, with if Manchester United is sold for £5 billion, they've got 69% of the shares. So they're probably going to walk away with £3.5 billion for a 60 or 70 million pound initial cost, and they've taken dividends since then. They've sold shares when it suited them. So leverage buyouts are common in the mergers and acquisition world. They are common for two reasons. First of all, there are tax advantages, because if you borrow money and you pay interest on those borrowings, interest is tax deductible as an expense against the profits of the organisation. Whereas if you pay for it out of your own money and you pay yourself dividends, then that's not tax deductible. So there are tax advantages, and without going into the maths, you make a much higher percentage return if you sell the company as a profit. So is it common in other industries? Yes, it is. Under a normal leverage buyout, you'd probably be looking to get out of the business within 3 to 5 years to make your money. And this is where I think we're different in respect to the Glazers. I worked out the sums before coming on the show. And the downside, and I think this is what angers many Manchester United fans, is that since the Glazer family acquired Manchester United in 2005, the interest cost on those borrowings has been £1.01 million per week. So that is what's gone to the banks. £1 million a week. Has gone in a week.
Jeez.
Yeah. And you say, well, that, remember you've got some players at Manchester United who are on a third of that.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah.
So you can understand it, and I've said this before. Manchester United, Old Trafford. I used to live in Whalley Range. I used to walk to Old Trafford in 1980 to go. I used to watch United and City on a regular basis when I was a student. Lived close to the place. Yeah, and it's not a wealthy part of Manchester, but the stadium itself is spectacular. But it is so far behind the times.
Yeah.
So it needs a huge investment. Would that £1 million a week have been better invested under the Glazer regime on making it a better experience for fans, as opposed just to trying to cram them in like sardines as they currently do? So that's where my irritation and anger lies. It's no different in many respects to buying a house. I couldn't have bought my first house bought with 100% mortgage. And then you hope to sell on, and over time you hope to improve your financial situation and get some equity into your house. So that's where we are as far as the Glazers are concerned. Now, in respect of Jeevan's comments, could you have a cash buyer? Well, I think we can, because there is the opportunities, there is the potential for Qatari investment. Under Islamic finance, you don't have the concepts of loans and interest as such. It is a slightly more nuanced form of funding, and also I think Sheikh Jassim, if his wealth is as it is claimed to be, he could buy Manchester United effectively through his existing resources or his family resources, and not have to further borrow. And I think this is one of the things which distinguishes the two of the known bidders, and there are more bidders, by the way, who want to go under the radar, and you have to respect that. I think the Qatari bid is likely to be a cash bid, with the aim of repaying the existing debt. Jim Ratcliffe's deal, there's no evidence that they're going to repay the existing loans. And indeed, it could be that they're going to take on further borrowing to buy out the existing shareholders. So it is possible, Jeevan. I understand that working in finance, you are familiar with the concept of debt and leverage buyouts. And I've said on the show on many an occasion, there's nothing wrong with debt inherently, because we've all got it. The issue with debt is you've got stated repayment payments, and if you cannot make the due payments on the due date, you've then got a financial challenge, and you've got problems arising.
Our next question, Kieran, comes from an old friend who we haven't heard of for some time, Benjamin Toast, who, as we've ascertained on previous pods, should really be called Benny Toast and should be a 1940s band leader. Benny Toast is a great name. Benjamin Toast says, we've all got our heads around amortisation. You speak for yourself, Benjamin. And he adds, apologies if I was looking out the window and this bit was covered. Welcome to my world.
Join the club.
But what happens when a player is sold below his original cost before the end of his contract? Is the cost of the transfer then condensed into the period of his contract? And is this why clubs let expensive flops go out on loan endlessly rather than get a token fee for them? I don't think we've ever actually discussed this concept specifically, Kieran. What does happen when a player is sold below his original cost?
Well, I think Benjamin is absolutely correct in that sometimes a club will put a player out on loan for a year or two in order to avoid showing a loss on sale. The reason why we tend to see profits on player sales, and if you take a look at the accounts of clubs, that's a regular feature. You very rarely see losses, is that for the purposes of the accounts, the profit or loss on the sale of the player is not the difference between what you paid and what you sold the player for, which is what you would inherently expect it to do. So, for example, we think of Andy Carroll as not being a success as Liverpool because they bought him for 35 million and they sold him for 15. But the calculation is based on the amortized value of the player at the date of sale. So if we use Romelu Lukaku as an example at Manchester United bought him for £75 million in 2017 from Everton. And he had a 5-year contract, which meant that he was going to be amortized, or rather his contract was going to be amortized for 15 million a year. They sold him 2 years later to Inter for 67. So you thought, well, we've bought him for 75. We've sold him for 67. That's a loss of 8 million. That's not very clever. The accountants come along and they show a profit of £22 million. And you go, oh, hold on, how do you do that? And what the accountants will have said is, well, we bought the player for 75. We've amortized him for 2 years. So therefore his accounting or his financial value is 45 million, sold him for 67, and we show a profit. And indeed, if you look at Manchester United's accounts for 2019, they do show a fair profit on player sales. So I'm not saying that the figures aren't manipulated, but the figures are complete fantasy. They bear no resemblance to reality. And I appreciate that it's my profession in theory, but I'm not saying it's shameful. But it is completely confusing, has no logic whatsoever, given the nature of the player trading model. And is, I'm not saying it's open to manipulation, but if you're a club and you want to make a profit in a particular year, just give me a call and I'll tell you which players to sell and which ones you'll make the profits on for your accounting purposes. And all of a sudden, things are being driven by FFP and accountants rather than a love of the game.
Well, you've answered my question, Kieran, because I was going to ask you to clarify for those of us who don't have financial brains why it's so important to show profit when, of course, you'd be expecting a lot of tax to be paid on that. So it's all for FFP purposes in a particular season.
Yeah.
Okay. We've started to see questions coming in specifically around different aspects of the potential appointment of an independent regulator, Kieran. And I suspect we'll be asking at least one or two of these a week for the foreseeable future. And the first one comes from Ross Pennington. And Ross says, we've seen an increasing trend over the last decade of American owners, including private equity funds, buying into Premier League teams, which has led to a lot of suspicion, especially from me, on the prospect of a closed shop division or even a breakaway league. Does the appointment of the new football regulator and the accompanying regulation mean that some of these owners will need to take big write-downs on their investment, and could this have a knock-on impact down the line? And when I say especially for me, I mean me, Kevin, rather than me, Ross.
Right. I think I've seen Ross. I think Ross is in Ohio, and he's bought a Price of Football shirt. I've seen it on some form of photograph. Thanks, Ross. I hope you're scoring a hat trick
of worldies.
Yeah, hat trick of worldies in walking football.
Yes, I felt that refers to somebody who told us that they wore our shirt and scored a hat trick in their first five-a-side game, which led to several unkind suggestions for people that said presumably it was walking football, knowing the average age of your audience.
Yes. I think there is nothing to worry about at the elite end of football in respect of the regulator, because the regulator is actually going to do, in my view, relatively little as far as the elite part of the game is concerned, apart from try to knock heads together. in relation to the financial redistribution, taking a look at parachute payments. And I was actually in a conversation before we did the show with the chief executive of a club, and he says the problem with parachute payments is that they become trampoline payments, and I think that's a very good way of describing them. There are too many clubs that are bouncing back, and that's why they need to be revisited rather than completely scrapped. So I don't see US owners being put off. The reason for this is that we know that the regulator was supported by the Johnson regime, and yet it didn't stop American owners coming in to buy Chelsea. We've seen new owners come in at Bournemouth, and that was under the Sunak regime. Again, but they were in favour of the regulator. So I don't see this as being a problem. In an ideal world, would some owners, if not the majority of owners, prefer a closed shop, a no relegation system? I think they would to begin with, and then they'd actually find that the value of their product, because if you're not one of the big six, you'll just become the make-weights. You and I are probably old enough to remember the Harlem Globetrotters when they used to come to London, and then they go and play this bunch of, they're just tomato cans, effectively. They're just there to make up the numbers, and it didn't matter whether you won or lost a match. The jeopardy that exists with relegation is actually part of the attractiveness of the Premier League, because all of a sudden the matches which are taking place for West Ham, for Everton, for Leeds United are huge games every week. And that attracts people to attend matches. It attracts people to watch those matches on television because, this afternoon, we're recording this on Sunday. Forest versus Everton. If it was the club, 15th versus the club 18th, neither club have a chance of getting into Europe. Would people be watching? Possibly not. There is extra interest in this because it has an impact upon relegation and the jeopardy that goes with relegation. So I think people underestimate just how significant the concept of relegation makes to football. And indeed, when you talk to people in the MLS, they say, actually, whilst we are a franchise system, we're really jealous of what you've got in English football and that excitement, because there's not many dead rubbers left in football these days as a result of 3 going down. You've got four fighting for the Champions League places. You've got 3 clubs potentially fighting for the lower European competitions and so on. So I don't think it would actually have a negative impact on the valuation, because it increases the jeopardy and therefore has some interest. At the same time, where else could the regulator have a possible negative impact? Well, what we did see from the sneaky 6 clubs who tried to join Super League is that they extracted more and more concessions from the other 14 clubs. They had their own WhatsApp groups. When there were Premier League meetings, you'd hear stories of them going off into a separate room and sort of sniggering away amongst themselves with the threat of, well, if you don't give us more money, and they'd be saying that to the likes of Steve Parish and Paul Barber and so on at our clubs, unless you do give us more money from the next TV deal, we're going to leave. We're going to set up our Super League, and you won't have any chance of getting into Europe, and the whole of football, with the exception of our clubs, is going to be worse off. And therefore, they extracted those concessions. And I personally would be only too keen to reverse some of them. So I think that's the only area where I think the regulator coming in and making it more difficult. And more difficult is not the same as impossible, because if the Glazer family decide to take Manchester United out of the Premier League to join a European Super League, that they are free to do so. And I think it would upset Manchester United fans, because if I was a Manchester United fan, even if I had the opportunity to play Barcelona and Real Madrid, the big matches for me would always be Liverpool, Leeds, and Manchester City, perhaps Chelsea as well, because you've got a bit of skin in the game. You've got a bit of history, proper history against those clubs, whereas you haven't against the others. So the benefits of the closed shop, de-risking, guaranteed revenues. We saw that with Super League. We saw that to a partial extent with Project Big Picture, which was the Glazers, John Henry and Rick Parry, their idea to a smaller Premier League. There was going to be less relegation because you'd have playoffs between the side finishing third, bottom, and so on. That appeals to US owners. But I don't see it actually as having a negative impact on value if we go ahead with the regulator.
I feel I should point out, Kieran, that relegation jeopardy is way less attractive when you're only 6 points above it. And also, who went to see? You don't want to see the Harlem Globetrotters lose. In the unlikely event that my dad would stump up some money to take me to see the Harlem Globetrotters, and it was the only game they ever lost, I'd have been heartbroken. The whole point was that they took the mickey out of people, teased the referee, ruffled his hair, spanned the ball on their fingers, and we all went home happy. Imagine you'd be broken-hearted, wouldn't you? I paid three and six, or how much it would have cost. Our penultimate question, Kieran, comes from Ian McLaughlin, a good, strong surname, obviously, as we know. Ian McLaughlin, and he has a question. This is very high on our list of top 5 subjects that our listeners are agitated about. It's about fake shirts. And basically, Ian says these used to be something you came back from a holiday to Mallorca with, and they were clearly not genuine. Now it's very easy to buy a shirt online for a fraction of the price that in some cases is identical to the real thing. The amount of fans we saw at the last Euros wearing 1996 England shirts would suggest that a lot of people are buying them. My question is, and this is the question that we're always asked, how are the fake manufacturers doing it? Do they have people who will sell them the designs for a small backhander? And why don't the genuine manufacturers do anything about it? I was sure if I started selling T-shirts with 3 stripes on them, it wouldn't be long before I heard from Adidas or Trading Standards. Is it because these shirts come from countries where there is little concern for copyright laws? I believe, Kieran, you once told us what the estimated value of the fake shirt market was, and it was an eye-opening sum of money, wasn't it?
It is. The fake market is huge. It is growing all the time. And I think, as Ian was hinting at, it's down to 2 issues. First of all, if we look at it from a cost point of view, there's an organisation called Red Points which did a survey, and it said that 90% of fans are unhappy with the current pricing of football shirts. Yeah. If you want an authentic match shirt for a club such as Manchester United or Liverpool, you're paying £100-110 for a shirt. Now, my argument would go, well, more fool you. You're not getting an extra £25-30 worth of value in terms of the material, and you're also just wearing it down the pub with your mates, just as you would have done beforehand. So you don't need an athletic cut. So there is the issue of cost, and there's an argument for saying that costs have been rising ahead of inflation, certainly ahead of wages. It is very expensive, especially if you're a family. You've got children. You absolutely understand. The kids want them for their birthdays. They want them for Christmas. We now, and I don't know when this ever sort of became explicit, but it's only probably about 5 or 6 years ago that clubs would say, "Well, we'll change our shirts once every 2 seasons." Yeah. And now it's every season, and it's 3 shirts every season for an awful lot of clubs. And there are outliers. I know that Brentford, for example, committed to a 2-year for their home shirt, and fair play to them for that. But there is a cost issue, and then there's a quality issue, and the quality of the fake shirts is really good.
Yeah.
And that's because it is now very easy to get hold of a shirt as soon as it comes out, or the football shirt website market is a very lucrative one, and clubs go to huge lengths to try to not reveal or not have their shirts revealed early. But there is always somebody working at a designer who will get offered. I'll give you £1,000 if you give me a mock up of the shirt. And as soon as you get that mock up, or as soon as you get hold of a snide version, not even a snide version, an approved version, and they do creep out, then you quickly get that to a factory. And remember, the shirts themselves are manufactured in Asian markets. Well, there's plenty of other Asian factories, and this isn't a criticism of people in Asia, because if you're a textile manufacturer, somebody comes along and says, I'll give you a deal for 5,000 snide Manchester United shirts. Well, you just do it, and because there isn't money going in terms of intellectual property from the manufacturer to the club itself, then you can sell them at cheaper prices. And isn't there a case for us saying it's a victimless crime, in the sense that, okay, I'm giving money to some bloke on eBay. The piracy people say, well, that could be organised crime. Yes, you're absolutely right. It could be organised crime, and then there's no doubt there are some pretty unsavoury people involved in this. But I'm getting it for 30 quid instead of 70. I have got I've got 2 or 3 kids. That makes a huge difference. We're also seeing, as a result of social media, eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Weibo, WeChat, WhatsApp. We're all on groups. I get all of my piracy snide Fire Stick information from social media, WhatsApp groups. Now, I don't do it myself, but I'm not going to condemn people who do it, because they say, well, I can't afford, because once again, there's a pricing issue. The broadcasters offer a very good service, but it's an expensive service, and some people are being priced out of that market. Similarly, with football shirts, if the price, which was, it was 40 quid, which then became 50. Then for the elite clubs, it very quickly sort of leapt to 70. Then they introduced the authentic shirts at 100. Well, it's something which you're going to replace in 12 months when they bring out a new shirt. You're not even going to get 2 years worth of wear out of it. It's an increasing market because it's lucrative, and the prices that are being charged for the product, frankly, are not justified in terms of the quality of the materials that you're buying.
I think, though, Kieran, of the questions that Ian asked, the one that most people will be saying is, why don't the genuine manufacturers seem to do anything about this?
Well, they are. I mean,
Right.
they have. Remember, trading standards, as far as that's concerned, we've had central and local government cuts.
Yeah.
We don't have trading standards in all but name,
Right.
because you and I, we both can go down. We can go down Oxford Street, and we'll see blokes with, and we're not in the 1970s, but it feels like the 1970s. There are blokes with stalls, and you go, that is that's an absolutely appalling mock-up of a Chelsea shirt or an Arsenal shirt. But there's no sign of anybody coming in to try to address that. So the authorities, as far as central and local government are concerned, are under-resourced, so they don't do it. And therefore it comes down to the Premier League or individual clubs or the manufacturers to effectively use private means to try to take on these people, which they do, but to a certain extent, they're playing whack-a-mole. You've only got to look at Amazon. And if I'm trying to buy a certain product, there's an awful lot of very, very similar products around from manufacturers who I've never heard of. I don't know if there's any intellectual property issues being broken, but it's actually very, very difficult to police because we've got such a broad and such a fluid market for sellers these days.
I was in town a couple of days ago, between Oxford Circus Tube and Carnaby Street, which is 400 yards, 500 yards at most. Mm-hmm. There were 3 stalls, and these were proper stalls. These were blokes with a few scarves or shirts draped over their arm. They're proper stalls set up in a proper way. So yeah, it's interesting because you don't see them being stopped or arrested. Not that you necessarily want to, but so you can understand why people think that they are just getting away with it without the likes of Adidas trying to stop them. We don't like going over the hour mark, Kieran, or producer guy seems to think that there's some kind of double time thing going on, which there isn't, because for double time, it needs to be paid time, first of all. But our last question brings us back to Manchester United. And I think I know the answer to this question, Kieran, because it seems to me that it should be obvious, but I've been really intrigued to hear what you say. And it comes from Adam Bull. And Adam says that Manchester United's share price fell when Cristiano Ronaldo first said he wanted to leave. Is there anything to stop players from shorting their football club shares and then causing the share price to drop by asking for a transfer? Would this be seen as a type of insider trading? Now, my initial guess at an answer to this would be that the law would stop them doing this, Kieran, but I don't know. But could you just explain to us exactly what shorting means before you actually answer the question?
Yes, the concept of shorting is that in the stock market, you normally have 10 days to finish a trade. Now, the rules have changed. It's slightly more complicated than that. So what it is possible to do conceivably is to sell something before you buy it. And what you say is that, okay, Kevin, I agree to sell you 500 shares in Manchester United. And we will do that at today's price of let's say that today's price is £10 a share. I don't actually own 500 Manchester United shares, but I've agreed to sell them to you. And I say, I'll give you the shares in 48 hours. And you go, yes, okay, that's fine. And then what happens? I announce, oh, by the way, Manchester United scandal. Rashford's going to leave on a free transfer because he's just found a dodgy clause in his contract. Bruno Fernandes has got a career-ending injury, and Ten Hag is missing the waffles and wants to go back to the Netherlands. So and you go, oh blimey, and I announced that on social media because I haven't been the heads up, and the share price falls, and I've got to supply you with 500 shares in Manchester United. The share price falls. I then buy those shares at £7 each, and 48 hours later say, here you are, Kevin, here's your shares, which you agreed to pay £10 for. Right. I've gone and subsequently bought them for £7. So shorting the market is where you are selling shares that you don't actually physically own. And in between the time of you selling them and physically giving them or transferring the ownership to the other party, the share price has dropped and you've gone in and bought them. So that's how that operates. Is there anything to stop Cristiano Ronaldo doing that? The answer is no, because he's not an executive of the football club. So I don't see any reason why that should be an issue. And the reason why he wouldn't do it is because he doesn't need the money.
Right.
Frankly, it's just he's a wealthy enough individual. So I do not see this being of an issue for the player. Now, if it was done by an executive of the football club, they are held to, in my view, a slightly different set of rules than a mere employee. So if it was done by the Glazer family, then I think they could be accused of insider trading because they would have had access to the information and they've taken advantage of it. When it gets a bit murky and this is where I think I do feel uncomfortable. There is a certain degree of snobbery and elitism when it comes to the stock market, because if we take the case of Kieran Trippier, when he was planning to leave, I think he was leaving Spurs to go to Milan.
Yeah.
He told some mates on a WhatsApp group, if you're thinking of betting on where I might end up next, Milan wouldn't be a bad choice.
Yeah.
And he ended up with, I think, a 10 or a 13-week ban as a result of that, because that was deemed to be targeting and effectively defrauding bookmakers, for whom I personally have very little sympathy. So there are double standards when it comes to this, because I don't think it would apply to a stock market. And also, the vast majority of football clubs, their shares aren't traded on a stock market, so you wouldn't be able to short the market anyway. Is a separate issue. But I don't think Cristiano Ronaldo, if he was planning to leave the club, this wouldn't be an issue. If he told other people, then I think we perhaps could be slightly murkier position.
Do you know what I really enjoyed about the answer to that question, Kieran? I mean, apart from the insight, obviously, and the information, was that, as we know, producer Guy listens to the pod before it goes out, just in case we've said something we shouldn't legally. And he would have been having kittens when you were finding reasons why Rashford and Fernandes may have been leaving Man United. He'd have been convinced that you were going to say something slanderous that he'd have to take out. And then Ten Hag, that gap between you saying Ten Hag and missing the waffles was just lovely. Just the sigh of relief that producer Guy will come out with when it turns out that in this fictional world, Ten Hag's leaving because he misses the waffles. If you would like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod, that would be very kind of you. You can do that by joining the many people who do so, and go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. We will be back with our next episode of the show on Thursday with all your football finance news. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell, which I believe is preceded by an announcement.
Yes, the Price of Football Live is coming to the great city of Leicester on the 11th of May. We're doing a benefit gig for the charity Memphis. Memphis is a fantastic cause. It raises money, but more importantly, it provides opportunities for children and young people with disabilities. It does after-school clubs. It offers them sporting chances. It's just great. And my very good friend Liam is connected with this. He's an absolute trooper, and I met up with him when Brighton played at Leicester a few weeks ago, and he'd said at the time, and any chance of just giving a talk to a few people. And I said, well, let me have a word with Kevin. Let's do the Price of Football Live. Hopefully we'll be able to sell a few more tickets. Tickets are just £12, by the way, £12. And the money's going to a good cause. We ain't charging a fee for this. We want to help out. And so if you go to the Memphis, I think it's memphis.org website, or just follow us on social media, we will be marketing it, and we'll come along, and it'll be a hoot. We'll start off with sort of a normal podcast, have a halftime break, and then there'll be a Q&A. So for those of you that have had questions that you've sent in to producer Guy, and you've waited 6 months and you've got absolutely nowhere, there's a far greater chance that we'll be able to answer them on the night. And of course, we'll be in the bar afterwards for a chat as well. So if you want to come along, but most importantly, come along to support this fantastic cause, we'd be absolutely delighted.
We would. And would you like to do your customary farewell now as well, or have you exhausted yourself?
Well, and if you want to give the show a bit of support, Patreon's one way. And another way is go on to that app of yours and to give us a review. I was watching BBC Four, and Top of the Pops 1983 came up with Dave Kidd Jensen and John Peel. And number one was Total Eclipse of the Heart, the antithesis of everything I love in music. So you could even say you would rather have the show presented by Bonnie Tyler and Martin Tyler, because it's going to be the Price of Football, and it's live.
I got very drunk with Bonnie Tyler one night, but that's a story I'll share at the live gig in Leicester. Dave Kidd Jensen, of course, a Palace fan. One of the nicest people.
I thought it was QPR.
No, Palace fans. He might have started as QPR fan, but he was on an unofficial director at one stage. So very, very, very nice chap. Well, bye everybody.
Yes. Bye.
The Price of Football. the price of football.